Welcome to Surviving Saturday, a podcast about holding on to hope in the midst of life's difficulties, disappointments, and dark seasons.
Times like that remind us of the agony and despair the followers of Jesus felt on the Saturday of Easter weekend, in between the Friday on which he was crucified and the Sunday on which he rose from the dead.
That Sunday forever changed the way that humans can relate to God. But what does it look like to be honest about the very real pain we experience in the in-between?
To fervently cling to hope in the God who promised us his peace and his presence, at times when he feels distant or even cruel.
I'm Wendy Osborne, a licensed counselor in Charlotte, North Carolina.
And I'm her husband, Chris, a marriage mediator, conflict resolution coach, and trauma-informed storywork coach.
Join us each episode for authentic conversations about how life not turning out as we'd expected has created the contextual soil for the growth of a tenacious hope in the resurrection and in a God who is still making all things new.
Story work we've found then is really the only way to get at that reactivity, those buttons, those triggers, how we deal with disappointment. Yes, I get demanding, but why? Mm-hmm. Yes, I get dissociative, but why? And I think the deeper level work has become, it's not just, aha, now I understand why you are so difficult and why you're so bad, but more, there's the deeper level is what formed you? Yes. What is it that makes everything in your body go on high alert if I just look or speak a certain way?
Yep.
Speak to that dynamic a little bit. How do you get to the what's underneath the
I think, one thing that comes to mind immediately is Kurt Thompson. I think it was in The Soul of Shame. He has this comment, everyone comes into the world looking for someone who is looking for them.
Ooh.
And they never stop.
Okay.
And to me, that's a picture of Genesis and God's making of the first humans and the blessing. I mean, if he's breathing life into nostrils, he's certainly looking face to face, right?
Yes.
In their eyes.
Yes.
And so there's this, we're always longing for good, safe connection and a person that lets us know we matter.
Yes.
And that would be in the image of God who let us know from the start we matter, like we are precious creations to him.
And so the way that shows up, I think, in story work, and you tell me if I'm wrong about this, but basically as you start plumbing the depths of the stories that forged some of these ways of reacting and some of these expectations, part of the purpose is not to go, oh, see where you picked up that bad habit, see where you started self-protecting, shame on you. That's not good. That's not where it ends, and that's not enough. It's to go, do you understand? Can you see why you're at age 10, you were longing, in your case, you were longing for safety and protection, to see the stories that made you crave that so strongly.
Because this same God put in us nervous systems that are charged with the job of keeping us alive.
Yes.
Now, we heard somebody say recently, and I thought it was so funny, help me to understand when I'm just reading a triggering email and I'm not actually being chased by a saber-toothed tiger.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, and that's well said. This nervous system is meant to surveil the world for danger.
Yes.
And it doesn't know or care if this is an emotional threat or a physical threat. But God put this system in us that is charged with the job of keeping us feeling safe.
Yes.
And so that matters to him. And so therefore, when we develop as young children strategies to find safety, that makes sense. And then if we do not heal, we will bring those same strategies into our marriage and use them against each other when the other does not leave us feeling safe.
And so you were longing, one of your core needs was for safety. I think mine was for relief. Can I just be off? Can I not be required of, demanded of? And if I can't negotiate that with a person, then I'll just steal it somewhere. I will find some way to be off by being passive, by not
Yeah.
showing up, by being sort of immature.
Yeah.
And again, I've sort of come to a place where, thank God I found ways to do that. Thank God I found ways to disassociate in a way and check out from the pain I was carrying. And
Right.
because I could have found other
Okay, but
also destructive
if you
ways.
had not found ways to keep your heart alive,
Yeah.
then where would you be now?
I would have been deeper in worse addictions, or I would have become this sort of, I would have had no accessible emotions at all.
Right.
I would just completely cut off and become just a brainiac.
Yeah.
And gone really, really in my head. And
Yeah.
like somehow God kept waging this war for me, not just
Yes.
to just be a brain,
Yes.
but to also have, desire and hope. But it's been a war. For sure. And so what you hear us talking about is we can have had this conversation 10 years ago, for sure. Definitely not 15 years ago, where we can understand each other's story better. The irony of one of these things I've noticed too is, like, especially when we've done an intensive with a couple, and you got one of them who's still kind of saying, I mean, I don't really, my family was great and we all get along so great. And the other spouse is over there going, can I say something? I might have seen something that I'm a little troubled by this. And there's some examples of that in our relationship where I've discovered some things about my family dynamics that, looking back, you're like, I always kind of thought that was weird. The way y'all dealt with conflict or stuff like that. So the irony is, if one spouse is saying, I don't really have a story, there wasn't anything bad in my family, probably important to listen to. Does the other person have some insights because they didn't grow up in your family system,
Right.
and they have their own swirl of things that were sort of chaotic and unhealthy, but they might see yours better, you might see theirs better when you start this. Now, the purpose of it is not to be able to say, well, there you go again, being your bad self. And
that's
being your
not love, which we're deciding, in our opinion, marriage is about.
Yes. If marriage is about love, what happens is we learn to go into those stories with one another of, like, oh my gosh, like I remember as you process some of the things about pain and ways that you were felt alone and the reasons you needed safety in your house. That was eye-opening for me. Like, hearing how things I would say or act a certain way would land on that, would make you feel that again. That was eye-opening. I'm like, I don't want to make you feel that way. Instead of, damn it, I'm not them. I think I had a lot of that in me for a while. I'm not your dad. I didn't do this. I'm not your mom, whatever. I shifted to, oh my gosh, I see what you've experienced. I don't want to reenact that. I don't want to land on that. What can I do to moderate or modulate how I speak or how I show up or how I physically hold myself so that you don't feel that again? And you've done the same sorts of thing with me. And so it's kind of an invitation to, it's almost like you're working on the bomb squad in a way. As you understand the things that are the triggers, that are the things that detonate, you can navigate them more carefully and go, oh, there's the red wire. I don't want to touch the red wire. I don't want to make you feel like you are threatened. How can I communicate this differently?
So I think it might be helpful at this point to tell a shortened version of a story of each of us, because part of our healing has come through not only understanding the stories that have made each of us who appeared on the stage of marriage, but to learn about the other.
Yes. Okay.
Because that's what brings compassion.
All right. You have one in mind in particular.
I do have one. You want to go first?
No, I want you to go first. You go ahead.
Okay. So again, this wasn't formed, this desire to be emotionally safe wasn't put into words when we got married, but my body was looking for a place where I could just exhale and be okay. I didn't have to worry. I think I probably had anxiety as a child. No one knew because I contained everything. And I was so committed to being good that I didn't talk about the things that worried me.
And you would put a smile on your face.
I put a
smile on my face. You were sort of known as, you had a great smile, but it would be sort of a shield.
Yeah. And so I don't know if I've said this part on here before, but I was not a huge reader when I was little. I really preferred to play outside with friends. But I went through this season in middle school where I was obsessed with books about people's journeys with cancer.
Okay.
And I think as I look back, my heart was craving for some safe company with which to land,
Yeah.
where my suffering could like have a home, so to speak.
Okay.
So wouldn't have had words for that, but I just knew I couldn't read these books fast enough. And I would lay in my book and in my bed and read these books, unlike any other book you could hand me. Like I would kind of go, yeah, whatever. I'm going to go ride my go-kart.
These are what captivated your
It
heart.
captivated me.
Do you remember what it was about those books? That really
I think it was my suffering had a safe community in which to land.
Because these people were
My
suffering.
pain,
and
yes.
it was normalizing that, hey,
Yeah.
you're going to feel pain. Okay.
These books were all about the journey, and I didn't have a place to land the journey of my pain. I
Okay.
had to be really contained emotionally and really, really good and unbothered.
Okay.
That was how I got connection.
Okay.
But one of the stories that comes to mind, I was, I think, 8, and my dad built both of the houses that I lived in growing up. Like he was not in construction. He was actually an accountant turned photographer, but he was very frugal. And so he figured out how to oversee a building project and how to outsource the things that he couldn't do and how to teach me how to caulk.
Yeah.
And so he was building the house that I would live in from the time I was 10 until I left home, which is the only house of mine you ever knew.
Yeah.
And so we were living in a rental house, and it was in the quote, bad part of town. And so there were lots of disclaimers about what it was going to be like to live in this area of town. And so I was already a little bit nervous, but also it sounded a bit exciting I knew there was a little girl next door my age. And so, and we could walk to some places. So there's part that seemed exciting, but we went into the house. This was probably right before move-in day. And I was told the room that was picked out to be my room was the room in which the previous owner had died.
Oh my gosh.
And so I'm 8, and
my word.
that did not sound adventurous or
No.
exciting to me. It sounded terrifying.
No.
But I remember laughter in the room as this was announced. And so my little heart stopped, and I don't know if I ever spent a night in the room. I mean, I don't remember sleeping in there. So I went and I slept with my older brother. So I figured out a solution.
Yeah.
But there was, as I entered marriage, because I had not unpacked any of that, my body was so desirous of safety and of kindness, not laughing mockery,
Yes.
but safety in which I could be afraid, safety in which somebody would say, oh, you're scared here. Let me help you figure out
Yes.
a solution. Okay, so instead, I figured it out, but I did it on my own. So we get married, and I'm still looking for this safety, but I'm also convinced, because that's not the only story where this was a theme, but I'm equally convinced that you're not really going to save me. You're not really that good, or more so, I'm not that worthy of being saved is probably the better way I would phrase it. And so I'm desperate for a human to come and make me feel okay. And I'm convinced that no human is ever going to find me worth saving. So anytime that you did not care for my fear or my anxiety, and I brought anxiety into marriage, or anytime that you laughed in just a certain way, my body would get activated. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was back in this little rental house, concrete floor bedroom, believing that I was all on my own.
And you had a longing for somebody to be the bigger, stronger, wise person.
Yes.
Looking out for you and first saying, hey, don't worry about the haunted place.
Yes.
We'll let your dumb
Yes,
brother
because
sleep there.
that was. Did I say that second part of the sentence? Like the man died in here. Colon. We hope it is not haunted.
We hope it's not haunted. That was an
And
important pronouncement.
that's
Yes.
where it terrified me, because by this point I had been to sleepovers where kids wanted to watch Freddy, what is it, like Friday the 13th and Freddy, who was Freddy?
Halloween, Friday the 13th was Nightmare on Elm Street.
Nightmare on Elm Street, all those, and I would get terrified.
Had y'all done the Ouija boards by then? Because I know you and your friends did Ouija boards at some point.
We did the light as a feather game and can you talk to the dead uncle game on the Ouija board.
Oh, my word.
You know, mass pandemonium with a group of little girls who are like elbowing each other and making the board move and then being convinced they saw something out the window. So yeah, fear is very present in my body at this point.
Okay.
Yes.
And so and what made it really challenging, of course, is you had no understanding of this, which meant you couldn't communicate to me.
Oh,
hey,
no.
Here's what's going on.
No, I was scared, and to cover that, mad as hell.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so that, I wasn't sure what I was going to mention as my story, but I think it fits beautifully. So my hero in the books I read as a kid, you know what I'm going to say, is Encyclopedia Brown. Okay. Encyclopedia Brown, for those of you who may be too young to remember, was the boy detective. Yes. Before there were Grisham novels.
25 cents slammed on the gas can in the garage would get him to take your case.
That's right. And so Encyclopedia Brown, the name of his, like one of the episodes or one of the books of it was all, every short, it was a bunch of short stories, but they were all, you know, Encyclopedia Brown. And the name of one was Encyclopedia Brown Solves Them All.
Yep.
Okay. Or
that was your favorite.
Well, yeah, it was my favorite because the premise of that was his dad was the chief of police, and his dad would come home with a perplexing crime that happened that you know the cops couldn't figure it out. He would tell Encyclopedia the story over dinner, and Encyclopedia would have it solved by dessert.
He
would know exactly what had happened and know who the bad guy was, and then he translated that into what you're talking about, the cord on the gas can. He would translate into, he ran a little detective agency for his friends, for, you know, people who were his
out
age.
of his garage.
He's like, and you can imagine how I gravitated to this as a third, fourth, or fifth grader. Number one, this guy was the smartest person in this world. He made the sense of the world. And I, because my family was so chaotic, I was longing for something to make sense of the world. And in a place where I could stand out. And, you know, I've realized a lot of my, you know, challenges and stuff are my parents took center stage. Their conflict was the central element of our family. I don't know what we would have built our family around otherwise, other than maybe my soccer a little bit, but basically I wanted answers. And so, and it happened that I was a smart kid and I did well in school. I even had a couple friends would call me Encyclopedia Osborne, you know, of course I puffed up hugely inside.
Oh yeah. I can imagine.
I'm the smart guy. And so imagine I bring that and I'm longing for answers. It's not just, haha, I'm smart. It's, hey, people see me when I'm smart. People regard me and think I'm special, because when my parents are having all their chaos, I'm not feeling special at all, other than I'm sort of in the middle of it trying to, you know, say things to my dad or bring comfort to my mom. I'm operating on this adult level, solving things, being asked to solve things that I can't solve, have no business really trying to solve. Meanwhile, I can't just, you know, be a kid and just have things just be ordinary. So imagine I bring that into this dynamic in our marriage. When you start, you know, having a strong reaction to something or being inconsolable or having an angry reaction, I want to figure that shit out.
And there was a part of me that wanted you to figure it out.
Yes. But I'm thinking about it from all my brain power. I'm thinking through it in terms of words. That wasn't the right thing to say. Okay, what else can I say? I'll say something different. I'll say better words. But it's still, it was not genuine attunement to you. What do you need, and curiosity about why you need what you need. It was, well, I got a new idea. I'll try this, and this will fix it. And then it would sometimes work for a little bit. It might be better than what I did, but it never worked for long. Right,
because I think it was your left brain to my right brain.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We've never, folks, we've never actually put that together, even juxtaposing the two kinds of stories exactly. For me, it feels a little bit, even a deeper level of revelation happening right here. which you can see the mismatch of that and why that led to conflict. Because eventually I'm exasperated because I feel like I've done everything and I've tried everything and I've read the daggone marriage book and I'm doing the right thing. Even folks, even when we started going to counseling, I think there was a time period when I weaponized that. Like, hey, remember what our counselor said? Remember we're supposed to do this? But I'm still trying to figure it out. It's still a puzzle. It's still something for me to solve, not how do I show up differently. Because Encyclopedia Brown, he might have had empathy. I don't remember, but that's not how he solved his problems usually. And I remember a poignant moment, actually. I was on a men's retreat one time, and I remember the speaker had, been saying something else about relationships. I don't remember who it was, but I remember being in the middle of that creek that runs through Montreat. And I remember my encounter with God being him saying, lay down the tools. Everything you learn, you are trying to use to extract happiness from your wife or bring happiness to you or get the marriage to be what's supposed to be. You've got to stop. And my counselor, I think, had been probably saying that too. But I came to this moment like, oh my gosh, I do that with everything, don't I? There's got to be a solution and this one will work. And having to die to that, and it felt like death because I'm like, what do I have?
Well, because what you had to date was helping your mother survive a really painful marriage and divorce.
And having to do that while being an 8-year-old and a
Right.
9-year-old,
Right.
being
Right.
woefully, on the one hand, horribly unequipped to do that, shouldn't have been in that role. And I did develop some attunement and caregiving skills, but it got all jammed up. And I didn't know when can I not be in that mode?
Right. And you got applauded by your mother for being such a good man of the house.
Oh, yes.
Right. And so that bound you to come in and you would make our home flourish.
Yes.
Now, great desire, but not when born out of desperation.
Right.
Now I'm over here wanting you to save me. Also, it's a job too big for you.
Yeah.
But then when you would fail, either because you did it wrong or simply because you were human, it confirmed my belief that no one would ever really save me.
And that you weren't
and
worth
by
saving.
that I meant I wasn't worth it, but I would never be made safe. Now, sometimes that would get put on God. We'll take that up with God. But I also didn't feel safe with God.
Right.
Because I had never felt safe with humans. And so part of my journey has been finding places who can hold my pain. And you have become a part of that group over the years. But once I could feel safe with some humans, it was more of a possibility to be safe with God, which now I feel.
Yes.
But at the time, it was all riding on people because God was such a stretch for me to feel safe with. And when you didn't come through, it was just a little reminder of, Wendy, you were foolish to ever hope that goodness would come for you. So then we're both left in our corners.
Because I'm over there going, I was foolish to ever think that I just wouldn't be used and I would be just consumed.
Yes.
And there's, the cry of my heart is there space for me?
Yes.
Can I just, and I was carrying so many unexpressed feelings of rage and anger and hurt and pain that I had no place to express. Now they would start coming out in our conflict. When something got landed, I would blow up. Yeah. And I would, kick the shit out of something or break a glass or there was rage in me that I had for a long time, I had no explanation for.
Right.
And then start to understand, wait a minute, there's a part of me that's inside that has some things to be angry about that predated before you ever came along and something's coming on. And I experienced that same thing as you also. Some place had to be some group of people. It ended up, whether it's a counselor or a counseling group, had to be a safe place for me to actually explore that rage. Not, bad, Chris, stop being angry. Why are you so angry? And the sin of, don't sin in your anger. And anger, man's anger does not accomplish the righteousness of God. All true things. Yes. But I had anger that had to have a vehicle somewhere. I had sorrow that had to have a place somewhere.
That's like telling a depressed person, would you just stop feeling sad?
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Like, it doesn't work.
And it's not helpful.
And I don't think that it's what God intends. I think that God is about tending to the heart and the brokenness of life and the way evil has come against God in the form of his people as image bearers. And so these stories matter.
And one of the verses that comes to mind when I think about that, and just the concept of learning to be more genuinely empathetic. I think I picked up on people's emotions and could read them, but to feel with them, to have empathy was a harder thing because not because I wasn't capable of it, but because I was scared of what does that mean? Is there any me left?
Yeah.
But I love Apostle Paul's words that one thing that Christians do is rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. And that's become a weightier and more momentous. That's not a light phrase. Oh, just be happy when people are happy. No. To mourn with people, to grieve with people, I see and experience. I've just experienced really differently. Like you said, with other people holding me as I go into my story, and I let the rage kind of have a place to go. That's and it's been helpful sometimes for you not to be there, because these people don't have to go home with me afterwards, and you same thing. And then there's this coming together that can happen when both people have done some of that healing work, and what you heard us do in this episode is the product of like years, if not a decade plus, where we can say, I want to come when we are getting up against those rough edges. How can I bring curiosity and ask and be curious rather than furious? Easier said than done. And can I bring kindness and kindness for what you experienced that made you react certain ways, and not just pissed off that you react certain ways that I can't stand.
Well, I think to me, the benefit of processing my life in this way with story work has meant that I have found a safety inside myself with God that then affords me the opportunity to let the experiences you have endured both break my heart and bring appropriate anger, so that I can love you and not resent you because you are not meeting my needs. So it's not even just about like, it helps with conflict. It's back to Dan's comment. There is more. There is more intimacy, more connection, more love.
Yes.
So when I can shed tears or feel anger on your behalf, then I actually can love you even when you're not meeting me the way I need. But the other half of that is that I have done enough of my own work that I long for you to meet me in places, and I'm not desperate when you don't. Now, sometimes I still am, but
of course,
but that is the trajectory.
I love your use of the word trajectory, because that's what it feels like. Like it doesn't mean we get this right all the time. We don't, but we catch it and we can see what's happening sometimes quicker, or recover quicker. Like, and so, but you, I believe, have learned. You have called me to be better and to grow up in some ways. And when it's not coming from the desperation, when it's not coming from the I have to have this or else I'm going to kill you or check out, when it's coming from the strength, it's actually really compelling. It's actually like, okay, I can't blow this off as you're just overreacting or you just this or that. I am sort of caught when that happens, and like, I need to reckon with this. You may have something to offer me here, and your steadiness and your peacefulness about it is helpful. It's refining because I'm not getting hung up on how it came out. And so the idea that we want you all to understand as we kind of bring this episode to an end, the way we'd phrase it is, in story work in a marriage, it's a process of learning to see the other person with an eye towards, as Wendy said, what they've endured, and have a respect and an honor for the stories they've lived through.
Honor. I like that word.
Honoring what formed their ways of seeing themselves, their way of seeing the world, their way of setting expectations, and how they learned to self-protect, to fight, to flight, to flee, to run, or to check out. Can you get past just here's the strategies they adopted? Important to know those. But what was the pain? What was the heartache? What was the hurt that led them there?
Mhm.
Grieve that together. And it's this kind of great cyclical sort of thing instead of the chaos cycle.
Mhm.
And you drive me nuts, but you drive me nuts, and you just chaos.
Yep.
You have a different sort of cycle where like, oh my gosh, I had no idea.
Yep.
And now that I understand you better, I want to honor you differently.
Mhm.
And we feel like we've been tasting that. And it's this weird thing of you can't give it to the other person if you haven't experienced
If you don't
it for
have
yourself.
it yourself. Right.
And that's where, it helps to be in a context where there is individual work or your own work with another
Yeah.
group. And then you come back together and say, how do we integrate this as a couple? Because times we're so aware of what we're carrying. There's sort of desperation of like, well, I get to go first. No, I get to go first.
Yeah.
And even having to work through that of how do we get enough safety that we can
Mhm.
enter in together. And sometimes will not get it right on the first try.
Yeah. Right.
What you're hearing is reflection and looking back that we hope to keep trying to get better at doing.
Right. And as we close, I just want to point out too, look, we are all products of stories, including our children.
Yes.
Okay. And so we have created or crafted portions of stories that our children have lived, that have marked and affected them for good and also for ill.
Sure.
And so we do not say any of this out of a place of merely being those on the receiving end, but we have also been those on the giving end. And there have been conversations, and there will be more to come with our
Yes.
children about how it has been to be parented by us,
Yes.
what it is like to be in relationship with us, and to be solid enough for them to say, hey, you're doing that thing again.
Yeah.
Where I can't talk about XYZ because it makes you nervous about ABC.
Yes.
Like, we are called to love our children in this way as well, knowing that we have authored some of the stories that they've had to endure.
And we have both been agents in ways that we have said things or operated in ways that were harmful. And there are other places where we weren't aware. We
Right.
weren't tuned in. We didn't know. And it's
Right.
partly because there may be things they didn't feel safe bringing us. And
Yeah.
we want to be receptive and own that.
Yes.
That is not easy also. But that's, I think, the amazing thing about this. As you understand your story more and more deeply and with greater kindness and compassion for yourself, it actually changes how you operate. Really, for me, it changes how I operate with everybody.
Yes.
I'm now
Yes.
doing family law work, most of the week while I'm, still in school getting my counseling degree and all. But I am sitting with people who are hurting and
Yeah.
making terrible decisions
Yeah.
or good decisions in the face of their spouse making terrible decisions. And I am able to sit there and hold myself together and bring compassion and kindness to
Yeah.
them, no matter who they are. Sometimes I'm representing the abuser. Sometimes I'm representing the person who's being abused.
Yeah.
And I want to, be that safe presence, even
Yeah.
though my job is, I'm not to be their counselor, but
Yeah.
I at least can be that safe presence where they can relax a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think it's valuable,
Yeah.
really, as we, to me, it's where that verse about sharing the sufferings of Jesus has become
Yes.
to be a little bit more meaningful.
Yes.
'Cause I used to be like, okay, great. So I'm signing up for suffering. What does that mean? I don't get it. But it's really, Jesus was acquainted with grief. That means he was
Yes.
acquainted with his own grief when he was, weeping or crying, sweating blood.
Yes.
He's weeping for what humanity has done and what he's experienced and what the world is about. And we can, as we grieve, as
Mhm.
we process feelings, it really is
Yeah.
transformative into who we are.
Yes. Yes. And, redemptive love is fueled by the grief of hope. So
That's a great way to
we'll
phrase
just, we'll leave the people there.
it. There you go. Well, can I add one more
Yeah,
too?
you can.
What's the verse? Perfect love casts out all fear. I remember hearing that and thinking, okay, so just be loving when you're afraid. No. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but experiencing love of people just being able to hold your story and say, actually, that sounds worse than you're saying it is. That's actually, do you understand that a 7-year-old maybe ought not to have done that,
Right.
or experience
Right.
that disappointment, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Being loved and being held in our pain, that sort of dissipates that fear you were talking about.
Yep.
And fear is a good thing to try to get rid of.
Yep.
So thank you guys for being with us.
And we'll be back.
Hey there, folks. We are going to pause the conversation right there because we've got a little bit more to say on this topic. The idea of story work being done by couples in a variety of safe contexts is something that's super important to us personally, but also it's really at the core of what we want to be about at Nurture Counseling. And so stay tuned for part 3, in which we'll talk through some of the frequently asked questions about story work. We'll talk through some of the challenges that it presents and how we navigate those, and particularly the challenge of what if one partner is more eager or interested in story work and more ready for it, and the other is not. If you have any interest in any of our marriage story work offerings, such as a marriage weekend or an intensive one-on-one with me and Wendy, or with a marriage story group, please let your interest be known. Email Elise, ELYSE, at nurturecounseling.net, and we'll be glad to add you to our wait list. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.